Hey guys, David here, founder of SuperThread. So in this video, I want to talk about SQL versus NoSQL and why in SuperThread we are using NoSQL. The story goes back a long way, about 15 years ago. I used to work for a big corporate. They had a big news outlet and I was the tech lead there. What I inherited was a SQL database on which this news site was running, and some of the queries were taking a long time. So when I started investigating, I realized that there weren't exactly that many records there, maybe in the tens of thousands, perhaps 100,000, but there were a lot of joins because the nature of the data was incredibly relational. And after doing some kind of testing, the problem was the joins. And if you think about it, the way the joins work is that each time you perform a join, the whole record set has to be iterated through to find the matches. Imagine having a query with 100 joins. That's what I basically inherited. And I found it very difficult to fix because when you inherit such a system that hadn't been indexed, it's an exercise in archaeologizing, and developers simply don't like archaeologizing. So it took a long time to fix and stabilize. Unless you are very disciplined and you make sure you index everything. But of course, often when you have so many joins and when the data gets so relational and so complicated, you end up kind of ignoring it unless you have somebody working on it full time. So at that time I realized, even though I had been using SQL for about 10 years, that SQL was problematic when it came to such data. After working for this big corporate, I built a game engine, and the idea behind this game engine was that it would run inside of a browser where the editor and the game would run also inside of the browser. So I wanted to ship it as a service, which meant that if you signed up for it, you could build your game and the database would be there with the engine. So you could keep your users there, the records of all your assets, etc., etc. And then what I started realizing was that with games, there are many assets, many records, and the speed is very important because gaming users can't wait for stuff to load. They want instant response. And SQL just isn't going to be able to do the job. At about that time, an open source NoSQL database was coming out called CassandraDB. And it was a mixture of something that Google and Facebook did. And it was very kind of basic to start with. It was very sort of flaky and unstable. So I started contributing towards it and I ran my whole backend on CassandraDB. What I realized then was that writing stuff for NoSQL databases was actually much harder and it took a long time. Because with SQL it's really easy. You just have relationships, you do joins, and you have everything you need. But with NoSQL, you kind of have to collate everything inside of a document. So when you do your query, you're just basically requesting access to just one document which contains all your data. If you imagine this news site I'm talking about, it would have a main article, it would have side articles, it would have authors and the dates, and all these records would be sitting inside of their own tables. And then you kind of do a join, then the query, which has all these joins inside of it, returns a result set which has all this information for you so you can actually render it inside of your web page. But with NoSQL, when you end up requesting this data, you just call up one document. This means that if you are doing things in a NoSQL way, even if you are using a SQL database, you can still do it because all you need to do is have one table, and this table needs to be extremely well indexed, but basically all you're doing is calling a single record from that one table. When I got going with CassandraDB, I mean, looking back, I never really used SQL again, even though I had experience with it. Then I created a bunch of games, some of which were extremely huge. One had to 20,000 concurrent users, and that was all running on NoSQL. It was MongoDB and Redis this time. And moving forward to SuperThread, which is our project management software with tasks and docs together, it's all NoSQL. So when you call a board or a page or a task in SuperThread, all you're doing is calling one document. In fact, you can tell the difference between SuperThread and other project management tools, which are done in SQL, which is, I think, most of them, when you have a lot of records. And so in SuperThread, when you have 1 or 10 million records, it makes no difference. It loads up exactly the same speed, where with the others, as soon as you start adding records to your workspace, even if they are multi-tenant, they start slowing down because the nature of project management is relational. And we actually invested a lot of time and effort to make it NoSQL so that it runs fast, however many records you have. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you learned something from this. And if you have any questions, just ask me in the comments. Thanks very much for watching and I'll see you guys next time.